what? I'm really honored to be up here to share my story, my testimony. Really, it's not my story. It's a God story. It's a story about God, how he's been calling me my whole life, and how I finally surrendered, and just the hand of God reached down and touched my life, and I will never be the same. But, the enemy is such a liar. I have been in my head for the past 4 or 5 days, just full of so much doubt. I've shared my testimony 100 times, but I'm just being attacked in the mind and then punking them out of their stuff, and I don't remember what age it was, but I just knew it was wrong. Despite that's the only thing that I was seeing, I just knew that it was wrong. And I know that's because God is built in my DNA. I know that's because God is built in my DNA, and he's a good father, but I just knew it was. And my mom was a successful drug dealer. My dad wasn't so good at it. She was raised Catholic. She was from Orange County. And she was, that one thing that I can give her credit for, they're both deceased, by the way, is that, in her crazy addiction, she had me and the kids learn Psalms 23, and we would recite that before we'd go to bed every single night. And I know that was a seed of faith being planted in my life through my mom, And from the age of 0 to 18, I think I went to church maybe 8 to 10 times or something. And it's just something about walking into church. I didn't know then what I was experiencing, but I was experiencing the presence of God, and I would just come undone, just bawling, and it was just like a place of refuge, at home I was experiencing a lot of abuse and darkness and despair, and I would walk into the house of the Lord and just feel covered by him, and I remember one time when I was 7 years old, I was at a church, a little Foursquare church in Wolford Heights, and one of the leaders told me something that I never forgot. He said, "Heather, we are all meant to be disciples of Jesus, a follower of Jesus." And I don't know why, but that stuck with me. I never ever forgot that. And when he said that to me, it just rang as truth in my heart, And then I think it was 9 or 10 years old. Another time I was at church, I had asked one of the leaders, if God is a good God and he's in control, then why do bad things happen to kids? Because I was going home and being sexually violated and stuff, and being beat up. And I'll never forget what he told me either, and I just took it for what it was worth. He said, because God gives us free will so that we can choose who we want to love, because God is love. And man, that just made sense to me at the age of 8 or 9, and I was like, okay. And I just knew what he was telling me was truth, but I never had a relationship with the Lord. So again, in and out of foster care, and then when I turned 16 years old, I was getting ready to go to another foster home again because my parents just went to prison. And I had asked my grandma in Orange County to take me several times, throughout my childhood, and she'd always be like, "No, honey, I can't." But I was 16 now, and I had the ability to articulate my words, and I was like, "Grandma, can you please take me? I do not want to go to another foster home where I don't know anybody." And she was like, "Yeah, Heather, I'll take you." So I moved to Orange County, and I met my children's father in Norwalk, California. That was a crazy relationship. I was down there for 9 years. And at one point, my grandma kicked me out, and I was living with my children's father's, well, he wasn't my children's father yet, but my boyfriend's mom. I was waiting for him to get out of prison. I was 16 years old. He was 25. And she kicked me out, and I had nowhere to go. And so now I'm 16 years old. I'm on the streets of Los Angeles. There's no cell phones back then. I'm that old, yes. And, I don't know where anybody lives. I don't know north, south, east, or west, and I'm lost on the streets of LA. And I was down there for like that for a really, really long time, and then after that relationship, that on and off relationship ended, I ended up moving back up to Bakersfield where my family's at, and then I met my husband, and I was with him for 10 years. And I want to say for the record, despite the fact that I didn't have a relationship with God, every single time that I gave birth to one of my children, I knew that God was real, and I have 5 kids, by the way. So when I split up with my husband, we had a 10-year marriage, and I had 9 years off of meth. I was still smoking weed every day, and I thought I was clean and sober, but I worked at the hospital, and I had a pretty normal life despite the smoking marijuana on the side and stuff. And, my husband was really, really abusive. That never stopped. And so I finally got a promotion at work and grew the courage to leave him, and then I relapsed for the first time in almost 10 years off of meth. And man, everything that I had built in 10 years was gone in 6 months, and it was crazy because I remember him showing up to hurt me, and And one day something just shifted in me, and I was like, you know what? I am done being nice about this. Like, I'm gonna retaliate. I'm gonna be nasty too. And bitterness took root in my heart, and it started to change the frame of who I was. And I didn't know it now, but hindsight is 2020. And right during that time in my life, I started serving the devil. I started doing all things wrong. All my moral standards that I had implemented in my life, they were just lowering the bar and lowering the bar and lowering the bar. So, I had a really nice home, and cars and a bank account and all this crap. And I remember just being like totally spun out in the mirror, like dressing in my little skimpy clothes. And I had this sunglasses obsession. I had like 300 pairs of sunglasses. And I was putting it on in the mirror, and I was looking at myself, and I heard the audible voice of God. And he said, "You're going to lose it all." And I knew that was a voice of warning, like if you don't turn and change your ways, you're going to lose it all. But I didn't listen to that. I ended up losing that house, and I went into a shelter. I branched 2 of my kids off, one with their father in Los Angeles, and my oldest daughter with her friend. And then I took my 3 little ones to the shelter with me with the hopes of a better life and a new beginning and stuff. And that's just not how that turned out. COVID hit, and I ended up in a hotel room because I got kicked out of the shelter. And when I ran out of hotel room money, I had nowhere to take my kids, And so I called my sister. My sister is a saint. I was like, "Please take my kids, Jackie. Like, I'm not doing right by them." And so she did, and I gave my kids to my sister. And I ended up being with this every guy I've ever been with has been really abusive. But this guy that I was with during this time in my life just took the cake. He was really bad. So anyway, I ended up living on the river, all of I would never ever just became yets in my life, And I remember a couple instances where I was, sitting around with my boyfriend and like having a good time. I don't know if we were under the influence or something, but I just felt like God urging me, like, get away from him and don't go back, And I would leave and be gone for a couple hours, and I'd go back, and then leave for a couple days and go back, And I spent about 5 to 6 hours out of the day with, my elbow locked and a knife clicked open, just swinging it, trying to keep this guy away from me, my boyfriend, because he was going to hurt me, And so that was the gist of our relationship. So, there was a time, so during this time in my life, my oldest daughter is now 18 years old, and she, I called her one day, and she just went off on me. She's